Thank you all for being so patient with my corralling. But just I'm delighted today to be introducing Bernard Stiegler. The group 3 events have been formed with a very certain depth to my ongoing acquaintance with his thought and work expressed in techniques and time. I'm not a philosopher, and so acquaintance with his thought has not always been such an easy ride for me, but it's stimulating and demanding. And when I first came across techniques and time, I experienced a certain shock, excitement, and some recognition of his daring thesis that time is originality technicity. This opened up myself to other thinkers that I hadn't been aware of, Leroy Gohan and Gilbertson and particularly. It's interesting to note that it's 20 years since the first book of Techniques and Time was published and written, and that its propositions are still feeling current and are continuing to be developed, I think mainly through the work of the IRI in certain empirical manners at the Pompidou Centre. And what's really interesting me is the overlap in Bernard's work between phenomenology, the critique of consumer culture, and biological and technical evolution. And I kind of think about it as a sort of Venn diagram of these things. Today, I'm thinking that in the relation between techniques and neurological evolution, and in the historicising approach to neurological questions, lies the quite everyday problems that artists encounter, often formulated by those artists in quite prosaic and quotidian manners. Question that Bernard has formulated through instrumental meutics, in which the what and the who are in processes of formation and deformation, to me is one of the questions that all artists face daily in their dialogue with material and technique, in aiming to propose new pathways for constituting a who out of a what, or producing subjectivities out of material and techniques. Bernard is doctor at École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. He's head of the Institut de Recherche et d'Innovation, which he founded in 2006 at the Centre Georges Pompidou. He's also president and co-founder in 2005 of the political and cultural group Arts Industriales, founded in 2010 of the philosophy school École de Philosophie de l'Union, alongside carrying many professorships, including the University of London. That list could go on. I'd like to hand over to Bernard for his paper called What's About an Art of Hyper-Control. Thank you. Thank you. Do you need to...
Thank you very much, Martin, for your invitation. I was deeply interested in the previous communication. 10 years ago, I argued that we have entered the hyper-industrial age, that ours is an epoch of great symbolic misery, and that this leads to the structural destruction of desire, that is, it ruins the libidinal economy. Speculative marketing, that is not speculative cosmology or speculative philosophy or speculative creation, having become hegemonic, systematically exploits the drives, which are divested of every attachment. Symbolic misery derives from what, with Nicolas Donin, we call the mechanical turn of sensibility, which places the sensory life of the individual under the permanent control of the mass media. The causes of symbolic misery and the destruction of desire are both economic and organological. It is a matter of the consumerist model and of those instruments that capture and harness consumer attention, implemented by the cultural industries and the mass media at the beginning of the 20th century. These instruments, controlled by marketing, bypass and short-circuit the savoir-vivre of consumers, their knowledge of how to live. Consumers are thereby proletarianized, just as producers have been proletarianized in the 19th century by instruments that short-circuited their savoir-faire, their knowledge of how to make and do. This industrial capture of attention also deforms this attention. First, attention is formed through education via processes of identification, primary and secondary, in the sense of Freud, which constitute intergenerational relations, at the core of which the knowledge of how to live is elaborated. Second, to raise a child is to singularly transmit savoir-vivre, which they will singularly transmit in their turn to his or her comrade, friends, family, and peers, both near and distant. Third, what is formed through all the pathways of education, including teaching, is that which the industrial capture of attention systematically deforms. The economy of desire is formed through processes of identification and transindividuation, woven in the course of intergenerational relations as the set of capacities to bind the drives by directing their aims towards social investments. The industrial deformation and diversion of attention short-circuits and bypasses processes of identification and transindividuation. As such, the symbolic misery imposed by consumer capitalism, which amounts to de-symbolization, leads inevitably to the destruction of libidinal economy. That is also negantropic structures. During the second half of the 20th century, there was a continual decrease of the age at which attention was captured in an industrial way. In the 60s, juvenile available brain time constituted the prime target of the audiovisual mass media in France via so-called peripheral radio stations like Europe #1. But by the end of the century, of the 20th century, it was infantile brain time that was being targeted and directed from its affective and social environment via all manner of programs and specialized channels, like, for example, Baby First, which is Fox TV, channel for babies. The object of desire is desired to the point of inverting the goals of the drives that support it. But this is so only because it does more than just exist. The object of desire consists, and as such, infinitizes itself, that is, exceeds all calculation, that is, entropy. To desire is to invest in an object and experience its consistency. And hence, to destroy desire is to liquidate all attachment and all fidelity, that is, all confidence, without which no economy is possible. And ultimately, it is to liquidate all belief and therefore all credits. The object of desire gives rise to a spontaneous belief in life and presents itself through this object as its extraordinary power. All love is phantasmal in the sense that it gives life to that which is not, to that which is ordinarily not. But because the fantasy of love and of what Abdelkebir Khatibi, a novelist from Morocco, called aimance, which is translated in English by George Collins, lovance, is that which grants to civilizations their most durable forms, the literally fantastic sentiment in which love consists is the incarnation of the knowledge of the extraordinariness of life that constantly surpasses life, whereby life invents by going beyond life, and as a pursuit of life by means other than life, in the case of the humankind, through the incessant and ever-increasing profusion and evolution of artifices. This is how I have interpreted the movement of exteriorization described by André Leroi-Gourhan in order to analyze the process of hominization as an invention of life by means other than life. That is, as a technological, organological, and pharmacological evolution that constitutes the human problem of life on Earth. And the responsibility that we have not to evade this problem, which is constantly being remade by technical invention. This is what it is impossible to think for Claude Lévi-Strauss. Love, as we all know, is strictly speaking the experience of artifice. Artifice, yeah. It is essential to fetishize the one we love. And when we stop loving them, we are confronted with the artificiality of the amorous situation. And we are brought brutally back to the ordinariness of quotidian life. This is the problem of the old couples of people. 2 or 3 million years ago, life began to pass through the non-living artifacts. There first appears what Aristotle referred to as the noetic soul, that is, the soul that loves, as we learned from Diotima in the Symposium. The non-living artifice conserves for life a trace of what, in the biological economy that Simondon called vital individuation, would previously have been lost forever in death. The inventive power of life that amazed Gilles Clément, the French gardener, thus becomes what Paul Valéry described as the life of the mind, or of the spirit, which with modernity and capitalism itself becomes the political economy of spirit, founded on industrial technology that has today become essential to an industry of traces. The productization of consumers, their desymbolization, their disidentification, and their confinement within drive-based misery subjects all singularities to the calculability that turns the contemporary world into a desert, in which one feels paradoxically and increasingly that as industry innovates more and more, it somehow turns out that life is being invented less and less. A situation that takes to the extreme what Valéry described in 1939 as what he called the fall of spirit value. The decline of the state and the hegemony of strategic marketing and financialization were imposed throughout the entire world and in every part of society, beginning in the 1980s. Along with these changes came drive-based misery and disinvestment, that is speculation, ruining desire and introducing forms of disbelief, miscreance, and discredit that continue to afflict every form of authority, every institution, and every business too, eventually leading to the insolvency that the collapse of 2008 exposed for all to see. The current and much more recent hegemony of the industry of traces tries to take control of the drives through automation and automatisms founded on social networks. The drives are, however, ultimately uncontrollable, and hence to try and channel the drives in this way by mathematical algorithms to exert an automated form of social control will in the end do nothing but carry the drives to an extremely dangerous level by disintegrating them, turning them into that Felix Guattari called individuals and not individuals. With the advent of reticular reading and writing that digital technology is, via globally accessible networks that use those web technologies that began to be implemented around 1993, digital technologies have led hyper-industrial societies towards a new stage of planetarianization. In this new stage, the hyper-industrial age is turned into an era of systemic and functional stupidity. Across networks of teleaction and teleobjectivity, speaking with Paul, production centers can be delocalized, huge markets can be formed and then remotely controlled. Industrial capitalism and financial capitalism can be structurally separated. Electronic financial markets can be continuously interconnected, directing in real time the automatisms that are derived from the applications of mathematics to the finance industry. Processes of automated decision-making can then be functionally tied to the drive-based automatisms that control consumer markets, initially through the mediation of the mass media, and today through the industry of traces that is also known as the data economy, that is, the economy of personal data. Digital data have succeeded in bypassing the deliberative functions of the mind, and a systemic stupidity has been established between consumers and speculators, functionally based in the drives, and pitting each against the other. This goes well beyond what Matt Wesson and Respire have called functional stupidity in the Journal of Management of London 2 years ago. In the last few years, however, and specifically after 2008, a state of generalized stupefaction, not only stupidity, seems to have arisen that accompanies this systemic betise, this functional stupidity. The resulting stupor is caused by the most recent series of technological shocks that emerged from the digital turn of 1993. The revelation of these shocks and of their major features and consequences, have brought about a state that is almost literally that of being stunned, in particular in the face of those who are now called the four horsemen of apocalypse: Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, and who appear literally to be disintegrating those industrial societies that emerged from the Aufklärung in Western Europe. The result has been what, at a public meeting of Ars Industrialis in Paris, we have referred to as what we call net blues, suffered by those who had believed or do believe in the promises of the digital era, including my friends at Ars Industrialis and myself, among many others. The hyper-industrial societies that have grown out of the ruins of the industrial democracies constitute the third stage of completed proletarianization. In the 19th century, we saw the loss of savoir-faire and the loss of savoir-vivre in the 20th century. And in the 21st century, we are witnessing the dawn of the age of the loss of savoir-théorique, of theoretical knowledge, academic knowledge, as if the cause of our being stunned was an absolutely unthinkable development. With the total automatization or automation made possible by digital technology, theories, those most sublime fruits of idealization and identification, are deemed obsolete. And along with them, scientific method itself. So, at least, we are told by Chris Anderson in the famous article, The End of Theory, the data deluge makes the scientific method obsolete, published in Wired in June 2008. Founded on the self and auto-production of digital traces and dominated by automatisms that exploit these traces, hyper-industrial societies are undergoing the prioritization of theoretical knowledge, just as broadcasting analog traces via television resulted in the prioritization of savoir-vivre, and just as the submission of the body of the laborer to mechanical traces inscribed in machines resulted in the prioritization of savoir-faire. Just like the written traces in which Socrates already saw the threat of proletarianization that any exteriorization of knowledge brings with it, the apparent paradox being that the constitution of knowledge depends on the exteriorization of knowledge. So too, digital, analog, and mechanical traces are tertiary retention, what I call tertiary retention. I will explain later what I call that. When Gilles Deleuze referred to what he called control societies, he was already heralding the arrival of the hyper-industrial age. The destructive capture of attention and desire is what occurs in and through those control societies that Deleuze described in terms of the non-coercive modulation exercised by television on consumers at the end of the 20th century. These societies of control appear at the end of the consumerist epoch. And what they do is make way for the transition to the hyper-industrial epoch. In the automated society of which Deleuze could hardly have been aware, but which he and Felix Guattari anticipated, in particular when they refer to individuals, control undertakes the mechanical liquidation of discernment to krinon, from krine, a verb that has the same root as crisis, decision. Excuse me. Discernment, which Immanuel Kant called understanding, Verstand, has been automated and automatized as analytical power that has been delegated to algorithms, algorithms that convey formalized instructions through sensors and actuators, but outside of any intuition in the Kantian sense, that is, outside of any experience, this being the situation that occupies Chris Anderson. And this is also the consequence of what I call symbolic misery, that is prioritization of sensibility. It seems that the prioritization of minds, and more precisely, the prioritization of the noetic faculties of theorization, and in this sense, of scientific, moral, aesthetic, and political deliberation, combined with the prioritization of sensibility and affect in the 20th century, and with the prioritization of the gestures of the worker in the 19th century, is both the trigger for and the result of this continuing crisis. As a result, no decisions are taken, nor do we arrive at any turning point, at any bifurcation, for speaking with Deleuze words. Whereas all of the toxic aspects that lie at the origins of this crisis continue to be consolidated. When a triggering factor is also an outcome, we find ourselves in a spiral. This spiral, which is also the object of Robert Smith, can be very fruitful and worthwhile, or it can enclose us, absent new criteria, in a vicious circle that we describe as a downward spiral. In French, la spirale du pire, that takes us from bad to wealth, from Cain to Scylla. The post-larval state in which we have left the crisis of 2008 means we should refer to it in terms of metamorphosis rather than mutation. What is going on here is not biological, even if biology comes into play via biotechnology, and in certain respects, in a quasi-proletarianized way. This does not mean that there is no crisis, or that we need not take account of the critical labor for which it calls. It means that this critical labor is precisely what this metamorphosis seems to render impossible, thanks precisely to the fact that it consists above all in the proletarianization of theoretical knowledge, which is critical knowledge. It is for this reason that I propose understanding the enduring nature of this crisis on the basis of the metaphor of chrysalis, of the chrysalis. The stupefying situation in which the current experience of automatic society consists establishes a new mental context, stupefaction, within which systemic stupidity undoubtedly proliferates as functional stupidity. Drive-based capitalism and industrial populism, but which can also be viewed in relation to a new concern, which if it is not turned into panic and instead becomes a fertile skepsis, could turn out to be the beginning of a new understanding of the situation and the genesis of new criteria. This is a Nietzschean question. This is a question of nihilism and a new belief. This new understanding would be that which, inverting the toxic logic of the pharmacon, would give rise to a new hyper-industrial age constituting an automatic society founded on deproletarianization, and which would provide an exit from the chrysalis of noetic hymenoptera, that is, based on the valorization of positive externalities and capacities in Amartya Sen's sense, that is, on a contributive economy of pollination. The proletarianization of the gestures of work amounts to the proletarianization of the conditions of the workers' subsistence. The proletarianization of sensibility, of sensory life, and the proletarianization of social relations, all of which are replaced by conditioning, amounts to the proletarianization of the conditions of the citizens' existence. And the proletarianization of minds, of spirits, that is, of the noetic faculties, enabling theorization and deliberation, is the proletarianization of the condition of scientific consistency, including the human and social sciences. In the hyper-industrial stage, hyper-control is established through a process of generalized automatization. It thus represents a step beyond the control through modulation discovered and analyzed by Deleuze. Now, the noetic faculties of theorization and deliberation are short-circuited by the current operator of proletarianization, which is digital tertiary retention. Just as analog tertiary retention was in the 20th century the operator of the proletarianization of savoir-vivre, and just as mechanical tertiary retention was in the 19th century the operator of the proletarianization of savoir-faire. By artificially retaining something through the material and spatial copying of amnesic and temporal elements, tertiary retention modifies the relations between the psychic retentions of perception that Edmond Husserl referred to as primary retentions and the psychic retentions of memory that he called secondary retentions. Over time, tertiary retention evolves, and this leads to modifications of the play between primary retentions and secondary retentions, resulting in processes of transindividuation that are each time specific, that is, specific epochs of what Gilbert Simondon called the transindividual. In the course of processes of transindividuation, founded on successive epochs of tertiary retention, shared meanings are formed by psychic individuals who thereby constitute collective individuals, and what we call societies. The meanings formed during transindividuation processes and shared by psychic individuals within collective individuals of all kinds constitute the transindividual as the set of collective secondary retentions through which collective protensions are formed, that is, the expectations that typify that epoch. If, according to the Chris Anderson article previously referred to, so-called big data heralds the end of theory, big data technology designating what is also called high-performance computing carried out on massive amounts of data, whereby the treatment of data in the form of digital tertiary retentions occurs in real time at the speed of light. And on a global scale, and at the level of billions of gigabytes of data, operating through data capture systems that are located everywhere around the planet, and in almost every relational system that constitutes a society. It is because digital tertiary retention and the algorithms that allow it to be both produced and exploited thereby also make it possible for reason as a synthetic faculty to be short-circuited, thanks to the extremely high speed at which this automated analytical faculty of understanding is capable of operating. The synthetic faculty that reason is being the speculative faculty for Kant. Prioritization is a fact. Is it inevitable or unavoidable? Chris Anderson claims it is. I hold a contrary position. The fact of prioritization is caused by the digital, which, like every new form of tertiary retention, constitutes a new age of the pharmacon. It is inevitable that this pharmacon will have toxic effects if new therapies, new therapeutics are not prescribed. Such prescriptions are the responsibility of the scientific world, the artistic world, the legal world, the world of the life of the spirit in general, and the world of citizens. Much courage is required. It is a struggle that must face up against countless interests, including those who partly suffer from this toxicity and partly fear of it. It is this period of suffering that constitutes the stage of the chrysalis. Generally, a new pharmacon may start out by short-circuiting the psychosocial process. But the short-circuiting of psychic and collective individuation that is being caused today by automatized transindividuation processes, based on automation in real time and occurring on an immense scale, requires detailed analysis capable of taking account of the remarkable novelty of the digital pharmacon. To achieve socialization, that is, a collective individuation, every new pharmacon, in this instance, a new form of tertiary retention, always requires the formation of new knowledge, which always means new therapies or therapeutics for this new pharmacon, through which are constituted new ways of doing things and reasons to do things, to live and to think, that is, to project consistencies, which constitute at the same time new forms of existence and ultimately new conditions of subsistence. This new knowledge is the result of what I call the second moment of epochal redoubling, that is the second moment of the technological shock that is always provoked whenever a new form of tertiary retention appears. If Chris Anderson can claim that the contemporary fact of prioritization is unsurmountable, which is to claim that there is therefore no way to bring about its second moment, the reason lies in another fact. Chris Anderson himself happens to be a businessman who defends an ultra-liberal, ultra-libertarian perspective. He remains faithful to the ultra-liberalism implemented in all industrial democracies after the conservative revolution that occurred here in London at the beginning of the 1980s, a revolution that short-circuited processes of transindividuation via the analog mass media, creating what Deleuze described as societies of control. For Chris Anderson, as for us, and as for the global economy, the problem is that the development, or rather the becoming, that leads to this stage of prioritization is inherently entropic. It depletes the resources that it exploits, which in this case are psychic individuals and collective individuals. It leads, in the strict sense of the term, to their disintegration. In automatic society, those digital networks that are referred to as social networks channel such expressions by submitting them to mandatory protocols to which psychic individuals bend because they are drawn to do so by the so-called network effect, which, with the addition of social networking, becomes an automated herd effect, that is, a highly mimetic situation, and one that constitutes a new form of conventional crowds, in the sense given to this phrase by Sigmund Freud. 10 years ago, I compared television or radio programs and channels to the constitution of artificial and conventional crowds, such they are analyzed by Freud, for which he gives the examples of army and church. The constitution of crowds and the conditions under which they can take shape are the subject of analysis by Gustave Le Bon, on which Freud commented at length. I quote Gustave Le Bon, who says, "The most striking peculiarity presented by the psychological crowd in the following, however be the individual that compose it, however like or unlike be their mode of life, their occupations, their character, or their intelligence, the fact that they are being transformed into a crowd puts them in possession of a sort of collective mind which makes them feel, think, and act in a manner quite different from that in which each individual of them would feel, think, and act were he in a state of isolation. There are certain ideas and feelings which do not come into being or do not transform themselves into acts, except in the case of individuals forming a crowd. The psychological group is a provisional being formed of heterogeneous elements which for a moment are combined exactly as cells which constitute a living body formed by their reunion, a new being which displays characteristics very different from those possessed by each of the cells singly." Unquote. On the basis of the analysis by Gustave Le Bon, Freud showed that there are also conventional crowds or artificial crowds, which he analyzes through the examples of the church and the army then. The program industries too, however, also form every single day, and specifically through the mass broadcast of programs, such conventional crowds. The latter become as masses, the permanent everyday mode of being of the industrial democracies, which are at the same time what I call industrial telecracies and not democracies. Generated by digital tertiary retention, net-connected artificial crowds constitute an economy of crowdsourcing that must be understood in manifold ways. Big data is one very large component of those technologies that exploit the potential of crowdsourcing in its various forms, of which social engineering is a major element. Through the network effect, through conventional crowds, that the network effect allows to be created, such as the billions of psychic individuals who are now on Facebook, for example, and through crowdsourcing that allow these groups to be exploited, including through the use of big data, it is possible first to stimulate the production of auto-capture by individuals of those tertiary retentions we call personal data, which spatialize their psychosocial temporalities. Second, to intervene by circulating this personal data at the speed of light in the processes of transindividuation that are woven through circuits which are formed automatically and performatively. And third, through these circuits and through the collective secondary retention that form automatically and no longer trans-individually, to intervene in return almost immediately at the speed of light in psychic secondary retentions, which is also to say in protensions, expectations, and ultimately in personal behavior. It becomes possible to remotely control, to telegraph, one by one, personally, each of the members of a network. That is what is referred to as personalization and user profiling. The Internet is a pharmacon that can thus become a technique of hyper-control and social disintegration, short-circuiting societies. And then there is a new politics of individuation, that is, unless attention is formed through the specific tertiary retentions that make possible a new technical milieu, and every associated milieu beginning with a language, it will inevitably become a cause of dissociation, that is, of desocialization, disintegration, and then of barbarity. The hyper-industrial situation takes what Deleuze calls societies of control, founded on modulation by the mass media, to a stage of hyper-control generated by self-produced personal data, self-controlled and self-published by people themselves, whether knowingly or otherwise, and exploited by applying high-performance computing to these massive data sets. This automatized modulation establishes what Thomas Benz and Antoinette Couvroy have called algorithmic governmentality. The digital allows all technological automatisms to be unified, mechanical, electromechanical, photoelectrical, electronic, and so on, through the production of all manners of sensors, actuators, and related softwares. But the truly unprecedented aspect of digital unification is that it allows articulations between all these automatisms, technological, social, psychic, and biological. And this is the main point of neuromarketing and neuroeconomics. This integration, however, leads inevitably to total robotization, but it is not just public authority. Social and educational systems, intergenerational relations, and psychic structures that find themselves disintegrated. For mass market to be formed, and for all the commodities secreted by the consumer system to be absorbed, wages needed to be distributed so as to supply purchasing power. But it is this very economic system that has disintegrated and that is becoming functionally insolvent. All of this can seem utterly overwhelming and hopeless. Is it nevertheless possible to invent from out of this state of fact, that is total disintegration, an art of hyper-control, for example, by reactualizing Deleuze support in his letter to Serge Danet, the title of which was Optimism, Pessimism and Travel, for the possibility and the necessity of what he called an art of control. I quote Deleuze, who says in this letter, television is the form in which the new powers of control become immediate and direct. To get to the heart of the confrontation, you would almost have to ask whether this control might be inverted, harnessed by the supplementary function of both power, to invent an art of control that would be like a new form of resistance, unquote. To invent or to resist. In this term, it is thus a matter of knowing where such a therapeutic might come from, how it might be quasi-causal, for speaking with the words of Gilles Deleuze. What is described as a therapy or therapeutic of a pharmacon, and more generally of an accident, is what is called quasi-causality by Gilles Deleuze, as you know, probably. In this case, the question would be then, what kind of quasi-causality is it possible to invent faced with social engineering and big data and network effects? This quasi-causality is indeed what can and must emerge from a new history of art, from, in other words, a new individuation of art. That art should again become what I call an us, that is a technique. This would be possible only if this us were also immediately an invention in the juridical field, which is also to say the political field, the philosophical field, and the scientific and economic fields. No doubt this is at stake in the letter of Serge Danet, to Serge Danet. Art has a distinct role to play with respect to invention in relation to the organological in general. But this is far from clear in Deleuze himself, who thinks this art of control much more in terms of resistance than of invention. Invention is always, in some way or another, organological, that is technological, that is always consists in inventing technically or technologically and not just artistically. An art of control of the kind envisaged by Deleuze or of hyper-control, which I intend to describe, would not be self-sufficient, except by hearing and making heard of, or reheard the art in art, that is techniques or techne in art, as in the Greek epochs of artistic or spiritual art. An art of hyper-control would need to be inseparable from a juridical, philosophical, scientific, political, and economic inventiveness. The question of such an art is that of therapeutic, for which art would be a primary, obviously inaugurating element, yet inherently insufficient, and where it would need to invent along with all other forms of knowledge including those technological forms of knowledge that make theoretical knowledge possible, forming, designing, and inventing, therefore, the arts of a positive pharmacology. But this requires organological invention. The pharmacological character of the digital age has become more or less clear to those who belong to it, resulting in what I'm calling net blues. The state of fact constituted by this new age of tertiary intelligence has failed to provide a new state of law. On the contrary, it has liquidated the rule of law as produced by the retentional systems of the bygone epoch. Property law, for example, has been directly challenged by activists through their practices in relation to free software and through reflecting on the commons, including some young artists who are attempting to devise a new economic and political framework for their thinking. These questions must, however, be seen as part of an epistemic and epistemological transition from fact to law, and by canonical reference to apodictic experience, projecting law beyond fact. Passage from fact to law is firstly a matter of discovering in facts the necessity of interpreting them, that is, of projecting beyond the facts themselves, but also on the basis of facts that are not themselves self-sufficient, onto another plane towards which they beckon, that of a consistency through which and in which we must believe. It was said by Nietzsche. Thank you very much.